Hey, Lindsay Berra, great to have you with us.
Great to be here, Ian. How are you?
Terrific, terrific. This is Halftime Heroes with iSport 360, and we're excited to have you to talk about everything going on in your career these days, but also your connection to sports, which you have connections to kids in sports, you have connections to professional sports, and certainly to your grandpa. So we are going to talk about all of those things today. Um, I let's see. Let's start with what you're up to these days.
So most of my time these days is spent working with Mustard, which is Tom House, legendary pitching coach Tom House. Tom House was the pitching coach for Nolan Ryan, for Greg Maddux, for Randy Johnson. He was the throwing coach for Drew Brees and Tom Brady. He started doing biomechanical motion capture analyses of pitchers in the late 1970s, and there are still big league teams today who don't do that, which is amazing to me. But Tom has Parkinson's disease and didn't want all of his data to be lost to history. So he partnered with some entrepreneurs and some engineers from like ML BAM and other parts of the world. And they basically built an AI engine out of his, 40 plus years of elite level data. We think it's the biggest data set in the world related to pitching. And you can take a two-dimensional video of a kid or a college kid or a pro, anybody pitching, and it overlays Tom's 40 years of data and spits out a 11 mechanical variable analysis. But the great thing about it is most people, when you get a biomechanical analysis and it says you have, 41 degrees of internal elbow rotation, like you don't know what to do with that. So this really simplifies the data and just tells you what variables you passed, what variables you failed, and if you failed a variable, it gives you a personalized improvement plan to get better at that variable. So it's like having an elite pitching coach in your pocket, and it's super cool. And we now have new coach and team packages where a coach can manage all of his pitchers on one app, or an organization that, can't afford to hire a pitching coach for each of its 35 teams. You can use Mustard, and Mustard is your in the pocket pitching coach. So it's been a lot of fun. And it's really, at this point in my career, it is very gratifying to be doing something that's actually helping kids. We get notes from dads and moms who say, my kid was really afraid when it was his turn to get on the mound because he couldn't throw strikes. And we clean up a little bit of the mechanics, and all of a sudden the kid can throw strikes, and he's super excited to get on the mound for his next outing. And it's really cool.
It's amazing. I wish we had a tool like this because you just took me back to some of my early failures on the mound that
Right.
have scarred me for life. But can you talk a little bit about, so there are a lot of tools out there for professional athletes that are just too much or too sophisticated for kids. Can you talk about how the younger kids, let's say like the 8 to 12 or 8 to 14-year-old set, can benefit from Mustard?
Yeah, so we actually have a pilot program running right now with a U13 team, I guess it is, in Richmond Hill, Ontario, the Richmond Hill Phoenix, shout out there. And what's really great for the little kids is that it's actually great for everyone though. When you tell a kid that his head is off balance, away from center, that he's falling too far towards first base if he is a right-handed pitcher, or vice versa for a lefty, he might be like, okay, whatever. But if you can actually show it to him in this like video gamified version of himself, right? It's the video with this like the skeleton kind of overlaid, and he can see that his head is over here. It's just so great to cement the words with the pictures. And you give him the drills to keep his head online. And then if he improves, he can actually see the improvement in real time. And I think a lot of kids, a lot of people are visual learners. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you're not, it's really helpful to have that reinforcement and to, in a same session, okay, these first five pitches, your head was not good. And then we talked about it and we showed you, and we gave you some things to focus on. And in your last five pitches, your head is much better. And that makes you more accurate, and more easily able to get the ball over the plate. And kids feel that, right? Like when you can reinforce success, and, obviously you have to learn from failure. If his head's not great, you show him why, you talk about it, you move on to the next thing, you pick out what you can improve. And Mustard really helps people improve like that in real time.
Amazing. So that's great. And shout out to Mustard to our audience for sure. The next topic I wanted to talk with you about was your own youth sports experience. Like you're an athlete. Fitness and wellness are important to you. And I guess your experience was different because you were growing up in a family where, you know, your grandpa was a bit of a celebrity, and yeah, I believe your dad played professional baseball as well, right? So, what was it like having them all involved in your youth sports experience?
So Grandpa Yogi obviously played in the big leagues and for a very long time with some distinction. My dad played for the minor leagues for the Mets. My uncle Dale played 9 or 13 years in professional baseball, and then my uncle Timmy was a running back for the Colts and the Giants. So they were all very athletic. But I don't know that like my brother would say that he felt a little bit more pressure, I think, because I grew up in the early 80s. I'm an old person, and there was more pressure on boys at that time to be good at sports. I don't think that I felt too much pressure about being a Berra. I didn't care. I also kind of had a little bit of a blasé attitude toward it when I was a kid. I'm like, I don't really care what you think. I'm just gonna go run in the field because it's fun, right? But I played soccer, ice hockey, and softball. Grandpa really did. Everyone always asked me how you got into hockey, and it was really Grandpa Yogi. Two things. Grandpa Yogi loved hockey, and his very best friend John McMullen brought the New Jersey Devils to New Jersey from Colorado when I was about 5, and Grandpa started taking me to games. And right around the same time, my parents had gotten divorced, and my mom couldn't always afford a babysitter on the weekends. She used to dump me and my brother at our local rink for the public session, like a 6-year-old and 4-year-old, just assuming the state guards would watch us. You can't do that today because DIFUS.
No.
But I really learned to skate at the same time I was introduced to professional hockey, and I just totally fell in love with it. But back then there weren't a lot of girls hockey programs, certainly not in my area in New Jersey. So I started playing with the boys at a really young age. And I grew up playing soccer, ice hockey, softball. I was the captain of the boys hockey team in high school. I played softball, and then I went on to play varsity softball, men's club hockey at the University of North Carolina.
Nice. Excellent. Excellent. It's funny when I speak to sports parents who are professional athletes or were professional athletes, I feel like half of them say that they are the quietest parents on the sidelines of their kids' games. Like they don't want to get involved. They don't want to tell the coach what to do. They don't want to make a spectacle of themselves. But then I have some of the others who say, like, you know, it's hard to be quiet on the sideline. Like we had Brandy Chastain on our last edition of Halftime Heroes, and she was like, "Yeah, you could say I was a little bit too engaged on the sidelines of my son's games when he was younger."
So Tom House, who I work with at Mustard, tells a story about when his son was pitching and he was like yelling at the sun and at the umpire, and he had to excuse himself and go watch from the outfield. And he made that his practice. I like to tell a goofy story about my dad, who one time showed up for a little league game. I'm like 10 years old, right? And I was playing shortstop, and I booted a ground ball just as my dad was walking up to the field, and he starts yelling E6, E6, which is very embarrassing for a 10-year-old shortstop. But that became the way my father announced his presence at every sports game he ever attended, regardless of what sport it was.
E6.
So if he showed up at the hockey rink, he would walk up to the last row in the bleachers and then just start yelling E6. So I knew he was there. Still does it. And I'm 46 years old. And like I showed up at my nephew's basketball game a couple weeks ago, and he looked at me and went, E6. So it's a little bit
Wow,
brutal.
that's pretty tough, but it probably gave you some thick skin, right?
Yeah. Yes. And as Grandpa Yogi would do, literally thumb my nose at my dad.
Yep. That's good stuff. Great. Well, the last thing I wanted to talk about today is something that I know is close to your heart and is also close to my heart, and it's It Ain't Over, the movie that you're the executive producer. You created this to honor your grandpa and to share his story. And I just want to start off by saying, you know, I've been to the Yogi Berra Museum here in New Jersey. I encourage everyone to do it. I also went to see the movie with my dad, my 80-year-old dad, and his dear friend. These are battle hardened, you know, former military guys, former stickball players on the streets of Brooklyn, New York. And they had tears rolling down their eyes, tears of of laughter and tears of the memories that it brought back for them. So it was just an amazing experience for me to be part of. I thank you for making it. But first, can you just talk about the experience? You were not an executive producer before. You have never done this.
No.
What was it like?
I don't know how to make a movie. What's been important to me all along, I've been a board member at my grandfather's museum for many, many years now, is just keeping grandpa's legacy alive. And I was, fortunate enough to be introduced to our producer Peter Sobolov, our amazing director Sean Mullen, our amazing production team. They know how to make movies, right? I got involved with this film originally from a logistical perspective. You know, telling Sean everything I could possibly think of about my grandfather, giving him everything I could possibly find to read, everything I had ever written. And then really just getting the list going of folks that I wanted to interview in the movie, like Grandpa's roommate, Bobby Brown. Vin Scully was like 95 years old. Audrey Graggiola was 95 years old. Hector Lopez, Bobby Richardson, not young men. And we wanted to get to these people as quickly as possible. And that was really how I got involved. And then as the ball kept rolling, I got more and more involved with the production of the film. And then at some point, Sean decided to make me the narrator of the movie against my wishes, but I think it turned out all right. But I'm just really happy to have it out in the world. I love hearing stories about people like your dad who get kind of transported to this like kinder, simpler time in America when they were growing up and they remember watching baseball with their dads and grandfathers and grandmothers. But I also love having it out there so young kids can learn about my grandpa. I think the young kids don't know anything really about him, so we can teach them about how good he was as a player and about the Yogiisms. But I think for the people in like the mid-range of ages, they really came to know my grandpa as this character, right? So he said funny things. He was kind of a funny looking little older guy, and they forget how good he was as a baseball player.
Hmm.
So I love having this movie out there as a reminder of just what a tremendous player he was. I think the best catcher of all time. Nobody's won more World Series than he has, and there's still many catching records that will never be broken, not with the way people play today. So I just love having it out there in the world as a testament to his amazing life.
Yeah, and so I agree with you. I would love to encourage kids, particularly baseball players, but young athletes, to see this movie and have their parents take them. So, can you just talk a little bit about some of the great lessons that you think apply to kids in sports from this movie from your grandfather?
I will also say too, even if you're not a baseball fan, my grandfather was a first generation Italian immigrant. He was a D-Day veteran. He was on the beach at Normandy during World War II. He had this beautiful 65-year love story with my Grammy Carmen. So it's an immigrant story, a veteran story, a love story, in addition to being a baseball story. And, you know, he just lived this great life. He was constantly underestimated and overlooked, and he just kept his head down and worked hard and let his actions speak for themselves. I think that's something kids can learn. He treated
Hmm.
everybody he met, regardless of whether you were the UPS guy, the president of the United States, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, or just like a guy he met in a parking garage. He treated everybody with respect. I hear so many stories about how somebody met him for 3 minutes, and in those 3 minutes, they felt like the most important person in the world,
Mm.
or stories from people who never met him but were touched by him in some way. And I think that the good lesson for kids that your actions, ripple away from you in ways that you will never know. And the way that my grandfather lived his life, it's just tremendous to see that all the love he put into the world has come back to him in spades. And we teach lots of character education programs at the museum, and I just try to impress upon the kids that, we're not all perfect, right? Grandpa was a special guy, and he was very able to do the right thing without thinking about it. But I think what you take away from the film is that if you just try to do a little better every day, you don't have to be the best every day, but do a little better every day, do the best you can, be nice to people. And I really believe Grandpa's legacy is in that effort, and it'll make the world a better place. And I'm getting teary here, so sorry.
Me too. Every time we talk about this movie, every time I visit the museum, I'm just touched by the type of person he was and how you've been able to tell his story too. So anyway, let's wrap up with a few lightning round questions that
These
are
always make me
much
nervous.
lighter, much lighter.
61.
Okay, here we go.
62.
No, not even close. We start with, what are the songs or who's the artist on your workout playlist these days that gets you pumped up?
Oh my God. This is embarrassing, but I like 80s on 8.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I'm down. I'm down with that. You want to get any more specific than that?
Um, no, I don't know. I put on 80s on 8 on Sirius or like the 80s station on Amazon Music, and just I'm always like you know, surprised by whatever random 80s song that they come up with, and I'll be like in the middle of a set of pull-ups and I'll be like, how do I still know the words to this song? I haven't heard it in 40 years.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the good
yeah.
news is it's coming back around because like my 14-year-old listens to 80s music too, which
Well,
makes me very
because
happy.
Stranger Things, like Kate Bush, yeah, like
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Okay. Next question. What new activity are you doing that makes you feel great?
Um, New activity. I would say the newest activity, it's not super new is golf for me. And I actually just went out and hit balls at the driving range last night for the first time in like 4 months. And I was excited to be able to get outside and maybe not so excited at what the ball flight looked like after so much time away from the course. But I do like playing golf. And for me, it's less about being awesome at golf and more about just learning a new thing, getting outside, looking at the trees, being with my friends, after work in the summers and on the weekends. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And once you smash the tree with your club, you actually feel so much better, right?
I don't
So
do
you
that.
walk away happy.
Everybody tells me like, "Oh, you're so competitive." Like, and I'm like, "You know what? No, with golf, I don't want to be competitive. It makes it not fun for me." And I tell everyone that I play a different game and it's called hit the ball and follow it, and I am the
Mhm.
champion of the world at that game. Wherever that ball goes, I can follow it.
Yep, yep, yep. That's good to set the expectations low and see if you can overachieve. Last question is, you spent a lot of years writing as a journalist in sports. Who was the most fun interview for you?
People ask me this a lot, and it depends kind of which perspective you look at it from. But I actually, the one always found the most interesting was Roger Federer. Actually, he, Swiss tennis player, but he was so impressive. He grew up in I think he was in the German speaking part of Switzerland. Anyway, he spoke Swiss German, he spoke French, he spoke a little High German, he spoke English, Spanish, Italian, and he was teaching
Wow.
himself Mandarin Chinese. So I'd interview him in English, obviously, and he was always lovely and gracious. But at the end of his press conferences, he would sit there and talk to Italian journalists and Spanish journalists and do his best with the Chinese journalists. And it was just so amazing to see that. And a lot of the European athletes are like that, bilingual, trilingual, just multilingual in a very impressive way that we don't see a lot in this country. So I always enjoy talking to those folks and getting the perspective of someone who grew up in that way.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for being on Halftime Heroes here with iSport 360. Wishing you good luck on everything you're working on, and we'll absolutely talk soon.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Ian.
Yes.